You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Coomer. Before I call this meeting to order, I'd just like to note for the record that I was recently designated by the governor to serve as chair of the corporation, so no longer acting chair. I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. And I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, ESD, we welcome public comment on the items of the items on our following agenda. After each item is presented and any comments are received from directors, we'll allow members of the public attending today to provide comments if they wish. All comments should be limited to 2 minutes, should only address the item that's under consideration at that time. I'll also note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on today's agenda items by submitting written comments by 3 p.m. yesterday. I'll note for the record that no comments were received, but that doesn't foreclose possibility of public making verbal comments today. You'll note that the final item on our agenda today is entitled Public Comments. At that time, we'll have an opportunity for members of the public attending to provide comments on non-agenda related matters. Please keep in mind that it is our intention to try to conclude today's meeting by 5 p.m., which is our allotted time. Now I'd like to ask the directors whether anyone has a potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda. If so, I'd ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We'll then be sure that you may recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with respect to such items. Hearing none, our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the directors' meeting of August 2, 2023. I think ahead of the meeting, one of our directors submitted some notes on the minutes, so I'd ask Gib Piccone to review any remaining concerns he has with respect to the minutes, and then anyone else has any corrections.
I'd first like to say that the minutes were very complete and very helpful, and I would like to thank the secretary for preparing them. I had 2 comments. One of them is on page 6 of the minutes in the first full paragraph, where there's a discussion about whether how the project has done in terms of delivering affordable apartments within the range of income bands that were specified in 2005. The last sentence relates to my sort of echoing Director Schiffman's request to see that type of an analysis. And so the request really was for a comparison of the delivered affordable apartments with respect to the 2005 Affordable Housing MOU and by income band.
So it would be helpful. You want us to?
I think I wrote it in
amend the
my email,
language?
but I don't.
I think between your email and the transcript, I'll be able to.
Yeah, why don't we make that?
Okay.
2025
change.
instead of 2005, so I can
Yeah.
correct the two. Thank you.
And
And I think there was consensus that when staff are able to put that together, it would be helpful to see those comparisons.
And then the second comment was later in the meeting. 1 second. It's on page 14. In the second full paragraph, it talks about a motion to request ESD prepare analysis of the cost of completion. I would just like to ask that paragraph specifically state that a vote was taken and the directors passed a resolution making that request.
Yeah, I was reckoning, does the transcript reflect whether there was a vote at that time?
There were sections of the transcript that were inaudible, so I
I see.
apologize that that was not there, and I will correct it.
Okay, yeah, I think there was at a minimum, there was consensus once we agreed on, we had some back and forth about the timing, but there was consensus among the directors to support that motion. So it can reflect it better.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments on the minutes? So if not, excuse me, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended by the corrections we've just discussed.
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
I'll
Aye.
recuse myself. I wasn't.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
Yeah.
With the motion passes with one abstention. Okay, so I believe at this time I would like to call on Joel Coltman, ESD's Senior Vice President of Real Estate, who will make some introductions of some new staff members who have joined us today, and then we'll continue with the agenda.
Great.
Joel?
Hi, everyone. So you might see some new faces at the table. I want to introduce Anna Peisior, who's Senior Vice President of Community Relations at ESD, recently joined us, as well as David Viana, who's our Assistant Vice President of Community Relations and Subsidiary Management, also recently joined us. And we also have Joy Huang back there, who is a Director of Real Estate, who's been with us for 8 months, something like that. So new faces, and we're going to have Anna deliver our presentation today. So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, just ahead of that, we had a number of people sign up to attend as the meeting. This would be an opportunity if any members of the public who are here want to identify themselves, but it's not required. Is there anyone who wants to make their presence known at the meeting? Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Thank you both. Hi there. As he said, I'm Anna Peisior. I'm the new SVP for Community Relations. I've been on a few months. My predecessor, Marion, may be familiar to a number of you from past meetings. It's a privilege to be working on the project. I look forward to getting to know all of you. I see a few familiar faces in the room, but I'm excited to work with all of you on this project. And without further ado, I will get started.
I'm going to scoot over.
Sure. So you can see. Great. All right, so starting with construction and overall development updates. To date, Atlantic Yards project has completed 3,212 residential units, which includes 1,374 affordable units. Since the last Directors Board meeting, construction has been completed on buildings B12 and B13. TF Cornerstone is still in lease up for both market rate and for the affordable units. They are working through the HPD lottery selections. They're notifying individuals within who have qualified about the option to rent the affordable units in alignment with housing and preservation and development. Here we can see B12, B13 in the bottom right. Those two were completed since the last board. Here they are themselves. Also, to date, 3 acres of open space have been opened to the public as part of the project. All right, moving on to updates. The owners of AY Phase 2 developer are currently in default of its obligations to pay back its EB5 loan debt, which is 2 loans total, with affiliates of the U.S. Immigration Fund. The default on the 2 EB5 loans does not cause a default under the ESD transaction documents. The ESD transaction documents with Greenland platform developer, which is the AY Phase 2 developer, do remain in effect. Item C, U.S. Immigration Fund. They had brokered the deal between the EB5 foreign investors and the EB5 lenders. Now, these lenders issued notices that the loan collateral, which is their ownership interest in AY Phase 2 developer, will be put to auction. That initial auction date was January 11th. It has since been pushed to February 12th. And I should note that any transferee of Greenland's interest must be a permitted developer that is approved by ESD.
Can you just clarify for everyone which are the lots that are subject to that foreclosure?
Yeah, it's the, it should be the blocks 1120 and 1121.
Lots B5 through B10.
Yeah.
Can you just go back to the last slide so I can just see it
Visualize that.
visually?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, sorry.
The platform set.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, there's lots that will be.
Got it.
I guess we'll have time for maybe some more specific questions after the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of next steps, at this time, ESD's goal is to determine the best path forward to advance the project and to get the remaining housing built. We are working with Greenland in an effort to have them comply with their obligations under the development agreements. It is our focus. We have been figuring out routes to complete the agreement under the development agreement to complete the project, and are looking forward to your feedback. Sorry,
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. So I would like to lead us into the public comment portion of the meeting that I referenced at the beginning of today's meeting. First, I want to offer an opportunity for board members to make comment or ask questions, and then there may be attendees who are with us today who wish to share comments that don't necessarily address items on today's agenda. So first, I think let's have an opportunity for board members to ask questions, make comments. Yep.
So I first wanted to just clarify the comment that the default on the EB5 loans doesn't trigger a default under the MDA, because the MDA does have language that specifies that an assignment for the benefit of creditors is an instance of default. Is it ESD's position that has not happened?
Yeah.
This was a mezzanine financing, so the collateral was put up by 2 Greenland affiliates that had the ownership interest in the platform developer. But it doesn't affect the underlying lots, it doesn't affect that particular entity. The 2 owners of that entity are in default.
So, but the owners of AY Development Phase 2 Are they anyone other than the joint venture, Greenland Forest City Partners?
They're affiliates of the joint venture.
Okay, so it's
And I
ESD's.
just also interested, an assignment for the benefit of creditors is a very specific proceeding under New York law. That's essentially a state law level bankruptcy proceeding. I've seen nothing in the record that suggests that kind of an assignment proceeding has been initiated.
Okay, so AY Development Phase 2 was created in order to break off lots B5 through B10.
No, they weren't created.
Well,
to do that.
I'm sorry, it was created to be the borrower again for the EB5 financing.
No, there were two other entities that were created to be the borrowers for the EB5 lending. So they were interposed between the Greenland entity that was sort of one step above. These two entities are owned by that entity. These two entities are the owner of the AY platform, the actual entity that has the platform development obligation. So the two entities that receive the loan proceeds is not the entity that has the platform development obligation.
Okay. I really think this is very important for the directors to understand. I know this is a complex set of transactions, but I would really like you to step us through that. Who is it? Who is it that now owns the rights to develop the 6 lots over the rail yards?
AY platform developer. I'm sorry. Does anybody have that?
Platform developer. Anyway, phase 2.
AY Phase 2 developer is the entity that has the obligations to develop the platform sites.
Okay.
And who is that?
And they have the rights and the obligations. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. Now, who is it, and once again, who is it that is the owner of AY Development Phase 2? AY Phase 2 Development.
Those are the two entities that were the borrowers on the EB5 loans, the two EB5 loans.
And who owns those entities?
Those entities are currently owned by another Greenland affiliate.
Okay. The AY Phase 2 Development owns the rights and the obligations to develop lots B5 through B10. Were the obligations to meet the affordable housing commitments of the project also transferred to AY Phase 2 Development?
That's one of the obligations they have to meet. The developer still has that obligation overall in the project development agreement, but those entities have to that entity has to deliver the unit.
Okay. So that entity, I'm guessing at this moment, doesn't have any revenue. It doesn't have assets beyond the rights. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I have no idea.
Okay. I think it'd be helpful to understand that as well.
But excuse me, why is it helpful to understand that, and that the overall development obligation is to deliver the units? Every other obligation in the development agreement remains in place. Those obligations run to us. What difference is there here?
Well, in other transfers, such as B12 and B13, those developers took the obligations to deliver the affordable housing. They were responsible for it. Are you saying in this case that even though they've transferred those obligations to AY Phase 2 Development, LLC, that Greenland Forest City Partners is still responsible for those?
Yes, they're still responsible under the
And
master
ESD
development
would be able to assess liquidated damages for failure to meet the affordable housing obligations.
Yes, those obligations remain in effect. So the liquidated damages obligation remains in effect.
Okay, and that is still binding on Greenland.
Yes.
Okay.
Ron?
Yeah. Given the fact that we learned at the last meeting that it'll take 3 years to develop the platform, that means that the liquidated damages must be imposed.
No, that doesn't mean that. Not until the date happens must they be
No,
imposed.
but in 2025, the platform will not be ready till 2027.
Correct, and the default will not occur unless they meet that delivery date.
But they can't. How can they build the housing if the platform isn't there for the housing? So all I'm asking is, what is EDC doing in order to prepare for that event?
Well, EDC isn't doing anything. ESD is,
excuse me.
ESD is in discussions with Greenland and is monitoring the situation very closely. And I'll turn it over to the project.
We have told Greenland that we are retaining all our rights under the agreement. I understand what you're asking, but we cannot. We've had conversations with our attorneys, and we have to wait for that date.
I'm not asking you for...
There's no way, in other words, to somehow accelerate the date on which those penalties
I'm not asking that the
triggered.
penalties should be triggered. I'm asking whether the agency is preparing a plan so that if that event occurs, they know how to expedite the development of the housing that is obligated to the community. I'm interested in the delivery of the housing and the delivery of the affordable housing units. And I don't think ESD should be waiting until the default takes place in order to prepare a strategy that we should talk about in this group and within your own agency on what you do when that day occurs.
And what I would add is just the transparency around the thing. Like, we see the cliff is happening, and I get that things won't be triggered to that point, but the clarity about what does that mean in that moment about when that housing will then happen. That transparency is, I think, illuminating, because it's just like reality sitting in, knowing that it won't be triggered to this point. There's like an understanding. I think anything short of that starts feeling, I don't have the right language for it, something slightly unsettling about, is it just because we don't want it? We can't name it because our lawyers tell us not to name it.
ESD and I'll turn over to the project team at this point because they're much more familiar with this than I am.
Build on it.
Pardon?
No, just.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Just adding to that point and just really just trying to understand that clarity or getting clarity for the sense of necessarily what is going to happen, because there are other things that are, or other factors at play for that platform, right? Especially when we're talking about what does it look like, or having that conversation with MTA, or seeing any of their challenges that are going to happen within the next 2 years as we're talking about building on top of that platform. Now, again, I'm sorry I missed the last meeting. I see all of that MTA was there, but still just trying to get a sense of what does that look like, because I know that environmental review is going to play a role in that too as well, and may necessarily add on to that timeline. So in thinking about it, that coming up with a realistic plan or just having something that you could share with us only just seems feasible.
ESD is not being passive during this time. ESD realizes that that date is coming. ESD is in, and again, I defer to the project team. They have the latest information on this, but they have constant discussions with Greenland, Greenland's plans on how they're going to move forward, how they plan to move forward. Other parties, such as the EB5 aggregator, has reached out to us. Other parties are going. There's not like a stop at this point. ESD sees what is happening, is aware of what's happening, and I defer to Joel and Arden to update on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's to the extent that is it, and we've been talking with Greenland about how they can best move things forward under the current approvals and the current scheme, and we are trying to get a path forward with them, but there's not. I'll say we haven't gotten anything from them yet.
Yeah. A couple of things, just going back to a couple of other items.
Yeah, but if I can, just on this point, I happen to have been a student of, or a friend of, the first executive president of UDC, the predecessor agency. And what he taught me and other planners and developers was that it's important for the agency to develop the strategy and be there before the program is developed. Develop the ideas, develop the means in which you're doing it. All I'm asking for is that there be transparency in the discussion with AYD, with this group, on how we can begin to, what will we do as an agency if Greenland can't deliver. And they can't deliver primarily because there's going to be a long delay, and we know it's going to be delayed. We may not be able to take legal actions now, but we could take and develop the strategy and the various different means and mechanisms to salvage the project once they go belly up.
The difference is, right, between creating that strategy before you ever enter into any sort of legal arrangement. That's not what you have here. You have lots of legal documents that govern the transaction. So it's not a blue sky opportunity.
I understand, but what will you do if they cannot meet the obligations of that? If the liquidated damages, they're roughly 25, 26 million a year, are 4 or 5 years, that puts them in the hole, a considerable hole, and they're not going to be able to deliver it. They're going to come back and say, we don't want the affordable, we don't want this, and they'll demand other things. I think you need to know what path you're going to take as an agency that represents the people of the state of New York in delivering what was an obligation to the community.
We hear your request. We hear the request for transparency. We'll continue to talk with you about that.
All right, good. So I have a couple of things. A couple of things from the last meeting. One was there was a mention in the last meeting that a consultant had been retained for a community engagement exercise, and that consultant might attend this meeting or the next meeting of this board to explain the community engagement exercise. Could Director Shipman's point, could we get an update on where the community engagement exercise is?
Sure. So we didn't retain a consultant at that time. We were talking about having a procurement done to retain a consultant. I think at the time there were questions from the board about that process and the need for that process. But also, given where the project is currently and who the real stakeholders are in executing the project, we don't see that a community engagement process at this moment would be that fruitful without assurance of a development partner who is in a position to fully execute.
Okay. And then another thing that came up in the last meeting was that MTA and Greenland Forest City Partners had agreed on the terms of a completion bond for the platform construction. MTA said that they had not yet received that bond by any coincidence.
They have not yet received
it.
They have not yet received that bond.
It would have been convenient, wouldn't it? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the default for a second, if we can. I mean, obviously Norman Oda wrote an extensive piece based on some FOIL requests he did today. I don't think it's necessary to go over the whole thing, but I mean, it does seem as if at the very least we don't know very much about what use was made of the proceeds of the loan, even though ESD did have the right, maybe even obligation, to request those reports from the developer. What do you all know about what's been made of the proceeds of the loan? Is it possible that the proceeds of the loan were used for something that was not a permitted use? Do you know that that's not the case?
During the period after the loan proceeds were dispersed, there was a massive amount of construction in the rail yard. That rail yard construction seems to be complete. In addition to the rail yard construction, the foundations for, I believe, perhaps two of the buildings, at least one of the buildings, are in place in the rail yard. To do this type of construction on the over the rail yard is very complex, as you know. The foundations have to be dropped or built up, really, from an active rail yard. And some of that work has been done. There's additional work, but the basic rail yard work has been completed, and that was a massive amount of work, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Do we know what percentage? Because it is visible when you visit the site.
We don't know. I don't know the percentage. We just don't have that figure.
Percentage of what?
Of the foundation work that could be done prior to the building of the platform.
I was concerned that percent of, that was my concern.
Percentage of loan proceeds.
No,
Yes. But I mean, it's a massive amount of very expensive, heavy civil construction work was done during that period.
That's inarguable, right? I mean, we know that this happened. Do we know that's, I mean, and money is fungible, but just for the sake of compliance with the loan agreements, do we have any backup that shows what the proceeds of the loan were used for? It was clearly envisioned that that would be received at the time the loan agreements were made. Has that ever been received?
We don't have it. Currently, I can't say that we have it in our possession, but we should be. We saw the inquiry and we would have to look into that.
I mean,
So is it your request that the board request that of ESD?
I don't always get the chair to be able to make my motions for me, but in this case, I'm happy to go along. I'll make that motion.
Any comments? Well, is there a second to that motion?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any comments?
Could you reword it clearly?
As I understand it, it's a request from the AYCDC board to the ESD to provide some information relating that it either has in its possession or can obtain from the developer as to the usage of the loan proceeds from the two loans. There was the initial one and then the mezzanine loan. To confirm that the funds were used, loan proceeds were used for appropriate construction and other related expenses on the project. Is that a fair statement of your request?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain, but the motion carries.
Do we have a date for that?
Do we? What's
Because we've made a
reasonable?
number of requests in the past. We even set a date for one of them, and we never get an answer. We have the motion on the books, and
Can we request that it be presented before the next meeting of the board? Which we hopeful.
We can at least update.
Yes, we included in your update at the next meeting, which we hope we're hoping to get back on.
because what the
More
press
frequent
said
schedule.
is they've tried to get it through legal means, and they haven't gotten it. And based on that, they don't think it exists. That's Norm Oders.
Let us come back. Let us come back to
Yeah,
you.
let's give them that
It
opportunity.
exists somewhere. It may not
be in the building.
in the building at this point, but it can be obtained presumably.
That's good.
Again, to Director Schifrin's point, something from the last meeting was the motion we discussed before relative to the minutes about producing an estimate for the cost of completion of the project. Can we get a status on that?
So that is something we are working on with the developer subsequent to that meeting. Mm-hmm. Given current status, that work has stalled on the developer side. So we don't have that deliverable for you.
But the stalling of the work wouldn't necessarily mean a cost estimate couldn't be prepared.
We are working with Greenland on that since they are the ones who have the numbers and all of that. So they have not delivered on that.
Okay, so they're not, so that, I would interpret that statement as they're not being responsive to your request to help prepare that information. You've requested it and you don't have it.
We've been working with them on it, and then we were not. And since everything happening, okay, we're not working with them on it.
You don't have staff that works on it as a means of even checking what Greenland is doing?
In what regard?
In other words, doing your own estimates on the side so that you're able to evaluate the work that's being done by the person that you're contracting with.
We don't have a cost estimator. Is that what you're getting at? Like hard cost estimators, construction estimators?
Yeah, or a consultant that's working.
It would be more of a third party
accountable to
consultant.
you, to be, so that you are able to hold the developer accountable to you and to the public.
Yeah, well, we certainly don't have that capacity in-house. It would have to be a third-party consultant.
I guess a concern that I have at this point is, although we haven't discussed it here in this meeting yet, I think it's generally been reported in press that a private equity fund known as Fortress Investment Group has bought a certain amount of the EB5 debt and is in a position, or may hope to be in a position, to work out a resolution to the default. And I would expect to be in conversations with the developer as well in that regard. I don't know if those conversations have taken place or not. But it seems to me that at this point, the future of the project right now is turning on decisions made by a developer that really doesn't look viable anymore, and a private equity firm that's, that's known for turnaround. And to Director Schiffman's point, I think we need to be armed with something, because otherwise we've got people making decisions about very important public benefits that this project was supposed to provide, who are not in any particular way stakeholders in those benefits, and have other interests that are superior. In terms of Greenland, they're, I'm sure, looking for as much revenue as they can bring back to be able to deal with their other liabilities. And in the case of the private equity firm, they're looking to make a return for their investors.
Right, but they couldn't step in. No one can step in and do this without presenting a plan to ESD for our review.
I understand that, but
a review that is undergirded by legal obligations that have been repeatedly reinforced that those are completely extant and in place and not in any sense waived. So
I appreciate all of that, but I'm going to still say that I'm concerned that when that plan shows up, I don't expect it, to be highlighting community benefits. I mean, I think that this is an economic thing for these two entities. And yes, I know ESD has to approve it, but ESD approved the collateralization of this loan, and then approved the second loan that further diluted it and potentially over leveraged the collateral to the point where it could be attractive to the developer to default. And there isn't any documentation that shows what happened to the proceeds.
The over-collateralization, I mean, there's constant confusion on this. The over-collateralization did not occur. What happened was the developer arranged an additional equity investment into the project.
With the same collateral. Yes?
No. The article that appeared, and there seems to be a constant confusion, people use the word collateral, and they think in terms of the fee interest in the real estate. And that's not what happened. What happened was there was a mezzanine financing, which allowed for an additional injection of capital to advance the project. That capital came in the form of this loan. The people who invested in these two entities that own the platform developer took the risk of putting in more capital into this project. They bought into a set of obligations to ESD. They still have to meet those obligations if they find somebody who is a permitted developer that is satisfactory to ESD. So all of the deal obligations remain in effect. Over collateralization, if somebody puts more capital into a project on the equity side, for us, that's a good thing. We still have our property. We have all our legal obligations. There's more money possibly to get the deal advanced and to get things done, and that's not a loss to us. That's a plus.
Okay, you guys have a lot of experience in this, and I respect that, but you also have a default now, because and we didn't have an auction on January 11th, and we might not have one on February 12th. There's nothing to confirm that this is economical right now, that someone will pay, effectively be able to make the lenders whole and develop the project as it's been laid out. We don't have any reason to believe that's based on either a contemporary estimate by somebody who's a professional in the field or by an actual sale.
the expense of having somebody come through and do an estimation on what would be a speculative real estate project would be gigantic and would probably be useless. You would have a, what someone would come in or what Greenland will eventually build there, what the figures will look, what the particular configuration of the building would look like. We know what's in our plan. We don't know what will actually be built. Somebody will present a plan at some point as to what will actually be built. At that point, we may be able to do an estimate. But to do an estimate now for entirely speculative idea that may be outdated or outmoded would serve no purpose, but it would cost us a tremendous amount of money because it would come out of our pocket.
I think we can come back to you on the idea of this financial analysis once some of these other issues that are brewing out there, like who will be sitting on the other side of the table, how much did whoever, if it's not Greenland, how much did that person pay for it? Like, I think we need to put a pin in this, not forever, but for now, until some of these other issues are work themselves out.
If I might, and I don't like taking up this much airtime in the board meetings, but I want to just read two elements of the AYCD charter. One of them says we're supposed to be making recommendations to ESD on ways to improve and expedite developer responsiveness to public obligations and increase transparency of project development. The other one says we're supposed to be developing recommendations related to the project, including in relation to unanticipated issues. This, I think, might be fair to say is an unanticipated issue. I don't think we can solve all of this in the meeting. It's not going to be possible. But I would like to suggest that we form a committee of the board to talk about recommendations related to this unanticipated issue. Have some discussion about it that can take place out of band, and we can bring it back to the next meeting. Because I really, at this stage, with and I want to say that most of you here at ESD were sitting at the table relatively new to the project, and appreciate your coming into this project, and you are following in on a lot of other history that's happened here. But the history is not one that lends itself to an abundance of faith in just letting things play out in their course. I want you to understand that with all due respect. It really isn't. This is nowhere near where we thought we'd be 20 years out from the project announcement. And so I think at this stage, it makes sense for this group who is charged with these things to take this up and talk a little bit amongst ourselves and see what we can come up with in terms of some recommendations, because I think we need to be a little bit more engaged at this point. So that's a motion.
It's a motion. I assume there's a second to it somewhere. Any discussion on that? I personally think it's a good idea for this group to perhaps meet in a less formal setting. I'd want to just get confirmation that we can meet as a committee of the whole without
advisory capacity.
I don't think
need to review the open meetings law. There are other committees on our other boards subject to the open meetings, and it would be like a formal.
But it seems to me there has to be a way for a board of this nature to have informal discussions amongst themselves outside of a formal meeting like this that's being publicly recorded. So if we can just get some quick advice on that, it seems to me like a good suggestion, and we'll try to convene that in the near future. For whoever wants to participate, will be a committee of the whole or whatever, something like that.
Well, technically, as long as we're not taking a vote on an item at that meeting, technically it's not violating open meetings law. So essentially, we can go and meet in Starbucks.
It's a quorum. You have to have fewer than a quorum.
Yeah, that's what I thought, which is why.
Argue on behalf of bureaucracy, but quite frankly, when I was on the New York City Planning Commission, 3 commissioners or more could not meet unless it was a noticed meeting. So I believe your suggestion that we look at the law It really is
Yeah,
important to do.
the quorum sounds right, and if we have, but we can form a committee that's less than a quorum, and
invite guests to that committee meeting, who are not necessarily committee members. We'll figure that out over the next
Okay.
over the next couple weeks. Because I mean, part of my reaction to some of the questions or comments have been like, well, do you have an idea of what ESD should do?
Yes.
So let's obviously this is not the place to hash that out, but I'd be interested in hearing those ideas.
The reality is that what we want is not what the developer finally comes up with, but we want to see a plan to develop X number of units on a particular site of which a certain percentage are affordable. And I would try to change the word affordable to a certain percentage that provide low, moderate, and middle income housing. I'd like to be more exact and get back to the levels in that MOU originally.
And I think, the word transparency came up earlier in this discussion, and I think we really have to talk about that, because I'd like to find a way that we can function as a subsidiary productively and engaged with ESD on this. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Anything further on that subject? Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on any item or any matter?
Just
go ahead.
Sorry, just a clarifying question. What's the time frame, if any, for ESD to select a developer? All right, just have it.
We need to be presented with the developer. And either Greenland is.
Well, Greenland is the developer.
Right?
He's the developer now.
Right.
Still.
So Greenland, and if there is a foreclosure that happens, we need to be presented with a developer. Before that.
Just so, yeah, I mean, I was looking at some of these documents earlier today. Unless a foreclosure can't go forward and result in a transfer without there being a permitted developer in place to accept that transfer. If they were simply to do a traditional foreclosure and the lender bids in, takes ownership, that's going to be a default under the that would be default. So they have to come forward before they can accomplish this foreclosure. They have to come forward with a permitted developer to take over.
Just another question. This Site 5 is not in default. It's not in contention right now. And since Greenland, we've heard, is not in default under the MDA's provisions for a bad debt. Presumably, what would happen if Greenland came tomorrow and said, I've got a great developer for Site 5. I'd like to separate that lot. I'd like a development lease, and I'd like to sell it to Drew here for, however many $1 million he was willing to pay. Is this an offer that ESD would entertain at this point, with the future of the rail yards being in doubt?
I would say that, well, the first thing when you raise this is that, to me, would prompt a community engagement exercise.
Yes.
That's which is not what you asked, but that's the first thing that would come to mind for me. And would we, I mean, they are kind of two separate components, as you said. We'd have to really discuss internally. I'm not quite sure.
I mean, it would be, let me just say, I mean, I think there would be a lot of cognitive dissonance if Greenland still got to take money out of the project at this point by breaking up a development lease on Site 5.
And could it make a community engagement process all that more difficult?
I think people would go ballistic.
Yeah.
Let me use that. Let me use that word.
Yeah.
Would not take that lightly.
Yeah. Understood.
Drew, are you interested?
Not at that risk.
It's priceless.
That was
That was it? Okay. Any other public comments?
When you talk about the public, people being able to join virtually, or is
I
that?
don't know, do we? No, I think they have to, yeah.
I just didn't know.
I guess which
Point of
raises the
information.
issue again of sort of venue for these meetings, and whether possibly, try to put them back in Brooklyn at some point.
When we discussed it before, I did reach out to the Brooklyn Public Library to see if that would be possible, and it's not. They don't have video conferencing facilities that ESD would need to bring these meetings there. We did do them before at one point at
LIU, right?
LIU.
Have we thought about BAM? I could ask.
LIU
Rick
is,
or BAM?
I guess we,
We did have meetings at Frick with their technology business.
I do remember that.
Does this keep changing?
I know.
and we've had no one sign up to make any comments, right? Okay. So there being no further comments, I want to thank the directors and everyone who attended, and welcome the new staff. We're glad to have you on board and look forward to working with you. And there being no further, is there any further business? Any new business? Okay. I'll call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay. The motion passes.
Do we know when we're going to have the next meeting?
We have to pull for March dates.
Let's try to do it. Let's try to do it.
And that's what we approve.
We have to do the budget.